Okay, and you're not seeing the presenter mode, you're seeing the full screen, correct?
Correct.
Yes.
Great, okay, thanks so much. So with that, we'll go ahead and jump in. I'll turn it over to Lev to get us started.
Thanks, Bill. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. As Bill said, we have a couple of slides, which was a little bit of a fib. We have 33 slides for you today. We're going to go pretty quick. A lot of this is just kind of a recap, some graphs, some charts. Sorry? I thought there was a question. My apologies. So this is just a quick recap on the IIJA, largest federal investment. Sorry, is there a question? I'm sorry, I keep hearing background noise.
I think you're just getting some feedback, Lev.
Oh, okay, all right, I apologize. Anyway, so it's the reauthorization. It's a 5-year bill, the largest that Congress has ever passed. Over $100 billion in new opportunities for MPOs and local governments. As many of you know, it created a number of new formula programs, one that includes a sub-allocation under the carbon program, invests heavily in electrification, and to a certain degree does incentivize planning activities with a higher federal match, specifically under the PROTECT program. Next slide. This is a snapshot of what's in the bill for the modes. There's 2 columns there. One's the contract authority, which is, as you know, funding out of the Highway Trust Fund. And then that far right column is the advanced appropriations that were provided. Advanced appropriations is a new category of funding that I think is unique to the reauthorization bills, the surface transportation reauthorization bills. It's $184 billion over the 5 years. Majority of that is in the grant programs, but there is a substantial amount for charging and for bridge formula program. Next slide. This is the distribution by mode. Again, just a graphic so you can see where the IIJA invests its funds. I will point out that the rail program, even though it only represents 8.5 on this chart, it significantly increased from the FAST Act. Next slide. This is the distribution of the formulas between, or of the funding in the bill between formula and discretionary. As you can see, the bill does continue the trend where a majority of the funds do go out in formula. But again, because of the growth in the discretionary grant programs, the bill did increase its share over the FAST Act for those discretionary accounts. These are some of the administration's priorities. This won't be a surprise to folks that have been following along with the Biden administration's release of notice of funding opportunities, as well as a lot of the guidance that has come out from USDOT and the White House through executive orders. Equity, transformation, safety, climate, large priorities, the policy priorities. This goes into a little bit greater detail on some of those priorities. Of course, safety is at the top. Equity and climate change are significant policy priorities of the administration. The Justice 40 initiative was an early initiative that came out through executive orders that is dedicated to ensuring that 40% of the benefits of the federal investments go to disadvantaged communities. And it's not just surface transportation. That's an initiative that covers the administration-wide practices and policies. Hopefully we'll see some sort of an accounting of that as things move forward over the life of the IIJA. But we do know that the reviewers at USDOT, as it pertains to the discretionary programs, are holding this and climate change very high on the list of factors that go into awarding grants. Next slide. So these are some of the IIJA provisions and programs, obviously. As you can see by the columns, some of the required provisions which include representation, coordination, planning factors, participation, complete streets. These are just a snapshot of some of the things that Congress decided they were going to require. There's some permissive provisions that allow MPOs to explore other policies and coordinated planning. And then you've got these new programs in that right column. They talk about carbon reduction, which is a formula program. It also is sub-allocated. I think 65% of the funds are sub-allocated by population. Protect EV charging and the bridge program have a formula and a discretionary component to them. Protect is not out yet. The bridge program is out. I know that the states and local governments are getting applications together as we speak. Next slide. So I'm going to go over some of the regulatory and the required changes that were in the IIJA. It does require the secretary to update the regs that ensure the outer years of the plan are defined beyond the first 4 years. This was something that's come up in a couple of our AMPO discussions as we developed our priority for the IIJA. Well, back in 2019, when it was just a Senate bill, this subject came up. The Senate staff directed the secretary to make these changes, and we assume that this is going to be part of the broader planning rule that we expect to come up soon. Bill, I don't know if you have any update on when that planning rule is slated to come out, but with everything that's going on, it may not be something that we see until later in this year, even early next year.
Yeah, I think early next year is probably right. Recently, we heard that early next year seems to be the internal deadline that they're discussing. You know, beyond just making this required change, they're seeing this as an opportunity to go in and make some other tweaks. And so we're trying to work with career staff to understand, you know, what other considerations are they looking at that would directly impact the MPO community. So we'll definitely keep everybody posted, but it sounds like we've got a little bit of time as they continue to kind of flesh all that out and shoot for early next year.
All right, next slide. These are some of the changes that were made to section 134, which, as you know, is the planning section of Title 23. With regard to representation on the MPO boards, they did make a change that when designating reps on the board for the first time, you shall consider the equitable and proportional representation of the population of the metropolitan planning area. This provision went back and forth between the House and the Senate. They ended up with consider. So it's not a requirement that you actually designate the board based on the population, but it says that for the first time, an MPO, when it's designated for the first time, should at least consider the board that reflects the population of the metropolitan planning area. On a coordinated level, MPOs designated in the same urban area. This is something we see not in every state, but in some states where you have overlap, that they at least talk to each other, that they coordinate, and to the maximum extent practicable, ensure consistency of data used in the planning process. Again, this is something that I think was the result of a few years of kind of looking at how MPOs in these same urbanized areas work together. You may remember years and years ago, at the end of the Obama administration, we had a rule that would have, you know, we called it a consolidation rule that would have really, in our opinion, forced MPOs to merge. It never had. Well, the rule did pass, and then we had to go to Congress to get the rule repealed. But again, they just want to make sure that there's coordination. I don't think that, and that's a big factor of MPO. So anyway, Planning factors, MPOs will provide consideration for projects and strategies that promote consistency between transportation improvements and state and local planned growth for housing and economic development matters. Housing is a big priority, and better coordination between transportation and housing is a policy priority for the administration. And we'll see that in a later slide under the Thriving Communities program that we anticipate coming out shortly. And then participation by interested parties. Again, there's a laundry list in the code of parties that Congress would like MPOs to talk with as they develop their plans, and affordable housing organizations were added to the list in Title 23. Next slide. There's a funding requirement in the bill. This is new. As you can see, it says that not less than 2.5% of PL funds should be used to increase safe and accessible options for multiple travel modes. It may include complete standards policies. Then there is an opt-out provision if MPOs can demonstrate to the secretary that they've basically met this requirement. This came up in the Florida meeting of AMPO a few months back, and it seems that a lot of MPOs are meeting these requirements already. I think that the USDOT has been very flexible. Bill, I don't know if you've heard anything different, but MPOs have been working with their regional division offices to meet this statutory requirement without having to actually set aside the 2.5 in new funds. And I think there's a variety of ways that USDOT is accepting this requirement. Bill, I don't know if you have anything to add on to that.
No, I think that's right. I think, anecdotally throughout the membership, it seems as though the majority of MPOs are already meeting that 2.5%, and there's not a heck of a lot of concern. Yeah, and in many cases, they're exceeding that amount. I had a slide because when I see requirements on funding, I always like to flag those things. But again, I don't believe that this has been a heavy lift for anybody in the MPO community. But please let us know if there are questions or you're hearing something different out of the USDOT. Next slide. Under permissive provisions, again, I talked about the housing coordination process. There's a pretty big new section that kind of outlines this coordination process. If you do want some more information on that, we can get you some further information on that. During COVID, the next bullet came up with regard to social media and other web-based tools to encourage public participation. It was a pretty easy one for Congress to accept. And then, as I mentioned earlier, under the new PROTECT program, there's an incentive, which you can see right there at the bottom. If you do, now this is unique to the MPOs, but if you do a resiliency improvement plan and develop priority projects, there can be a 7% reduction on the local match. If you actually put the plan into your long-range plan, then you get another 3%. So for a total of 10% additional federal share for PROTECT projects. So thought it was important. We're waiting still for the guidance on this program, even though the formula money has been apportioned. We are still expecting some guidance on how USDOT is going to implement this new program. Next slide. New formula program. You may all be very familiar with it. I won't spend too much time on it. It's a brand new program. Again, Congress decided to create one that reduces carbon. Again, a major theme throughout the IIJA. 65% of the funding that's distributed by formula is suballocated. It does require the states to make some obligation authority available for these programs as well. And it does require some consultation with the MPO on a carbon reduction strategy
that the states have to come up with under the new provision. Next slide. I mentioned Protect already. I don't want to spend too much time on it. Again, it's a split program with formula and discretionary. This is a program that is dedicated to funding projects to adapt to changing weather events and address the impacts of climate change. There are planning funds as well as construction grant. And the eligibility under this is pretty broad, as you can see, highway, transit, and ports. Next slide.
And just real quick, Lev, we've heard recently, as recent as last week, that the guidance for Protect is sort of in the final stages of review, and that we should expect to see something probably in the next couple of weeks. So just an FYI, and as soon as that's made available, we'll make sure to get it out to everybody.
I mentioned the new bridge formula program provides a little bit more information on this. There is 5.5 billion in advanced appropriations, again, not subject to the obligation limitation, which is something that impacts highway trust funds, but it's a lot of money. It's dedicated towards bridges. You may have noticed over the last few years that Congress, through the appropriations process, has set aside billions of dollars for bridge replacement and rehabilitation within the IIJA for 5 years. Now they've got a dedicated formula program as well as a grant program. 15% is used for off-system bridges, and they're 100% federal share for off-system bridges. So that's something that I know the local governments are very interested in. Next slide. This is the new NEVI program. This is the charging program that's $1 billion annually, again, in advanced appropriations to deploy EV charging infrastructure in advance of the growth in EV vehicles. Hopefully there'll be more selection in the next few years. States do have to put together a plan. The deadline is just around the corner. It's due August 1st. There's a lot of information available on the USDOT website with regard to the NEVI program. So I hope the state's working with you. We've been getting a little bit of feedback from some MPOs, but we're always interested to learn what's going on within any of the jurisdictions at MPO. Next slide. Collaborate to be competitive.
Hey, Lev, I'm sorry to interject. Before we move on to the discretionary programs, I just had 2 quick items I wanted to add and sort of ask the group on one of them. One is just an update on census. While not directly related to IIJA, obviously it will impact things across the board. We heard as recent as yesterday that the new timeline that the Bureau is working under to publish the final delineations is December of this year. So we're looking at the end of this calendar year, potentially even possibly January of next year to publish those final delineations. So we'll keep everybody posted if that changes. We're also hearing that those new population numbers then wouldn't likely be applied by USDOT until federal fiscal year 24 at that point. And so we'll kind of keep everybody posted if any of that changes or we get any new information. Quickly on Lev, anything to add? Lev, anything to add on that?
No, not on
Okay.
that.
The other item that I apologize we neglected to include here, and what I wanted to ask the room about is the new requirement to set up a process between the state and the non-TMAs in terms of the distribution of SCBG funds. There's to be a process that's set up in coordination to equitably distribute those funds to the non-TMAs throughout the state. So I was just curious if that conversation had started and how things are going, if that's something that has been on your radar.
Went right over my head.
No, that's not on our radar. You said STVG grants, the Service Transportation Block Grants?
Correct.
No.
Yeah.
I haven't heard anything about that.
Okay. All right. Well, that's something that we can definitely follow up on and share some additional information. I apologize it wasn't included in this presentation, but we can pull the statutory language and share some additional info on what we've heard from other MPOs throughout other states and throughout the membership, and sort of how those discussions are progressing related to that provision. So, Lev, did I misstate anything? Is there anything you want to add to that?
No, yeah, I thought we had it on a slide. I'm surprised we didn't. That was a pretty important one. Yeah, so we'll add that. But no, I think you explained it exactly right. Now it does one thing. I don't know, Bill, if you mentioned this, but the consultation process is supposed to cover the 5 years of the bill. It's not an annual unless you and the state to try to, want to do some sort of an annual formula mechanism. There's some flexibility built into the provision to let the MPOs and the state come up with whatever best that solution looks like, the non-TMA. So yeah, we can get some further information out.
Okay,
So,
sorry, Lev. So we can move on.
Yeah, no worries. This slide is again pretty straightforward. We got 17 programs, over 100 billion in discretionary. USDOT, as you probably know, has a website that details when the expected date for notice of funding opportunities are going to be released. There was a new type of NOFO that was put out this year that combined 3 programs into one under the multimodal projects discretionary grants. That was rural, mega, and infra. And this is a new method that I think USDOT is trying out that provides them with really a lot of discretion in awarding grants, so that they can, if you have a project that may be eligible in 2 categories of grant funding, they can then manage the distribution of the awards a little bit easier. So it'll be interesting to see what the results of that combined application does look like. And then coordination at all levels. This is something that I've heard on a number of webinars from USDOT, where there's an emphasis on joint applications between the state and local partners as they seek federal grants. And in fact, some of the grant programs the state's not even eligible for. It's only a couple, but I think that this USDOT under this administration is looking for a higher level of coordination between the state and the locals. Next slide.
Yeah. And one quick thing to flag on the combined NOFO, and we're seeing this in some of the subsequent NOFOs and forthcoming NOFOs as well, but there's a footnote in there that explicitly states if the project that you're applying for is not on the tip, it will need to be on the tip in order for any funding to actually be pushed out. So you can apply for something if it's not currently on your tip, but before USDOT is going to award you any funds, they're going to want to see that it's actually on the tip before they make that grant. Lev, is there anything you want to add to that?
No.
Okay.
No. We can go through these pretty quick. This is just, and we're going to leave this, right, Bill? This will be something that they can take a look at. But
yes, I'll share this slide deck following the meeting.
This just shows some of the grant programs that have been released, the due dates, and when USDOT is expected to release additional notice of funding opportunities. Next slide. Same thing. You take a look at this. There's a lot coming out, as you can see. There's a lot of TBDs on this on this list. So stay tuned. Next slide. Yeah,
we expect September, October to be quite busy.
Yeah, the fall. And just I would like to reiterate, or not reiterate, but just in terms of the actual awards, we've already seen under the FAA programs, the airport terminal program awards have been made. And under RAISE grants, awards are supposed to be published by August 12th. It's not on the slide, Bill, but it's in the notice of funding opportunity. Typically, USDOT will notify the congressional members first, and then press releases generally follow that notification pretty quickly. So we should see the awards under the RAISE program, which was over $1 billion, close to two, actually it was over $2 billion after the appropriations process. Those awards should be coming out in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, I just wanted to make the point that that's a pretty quick turnaround considering applications were due on April 14th. So I suspect we'll see them trying to accelerate that turnaround with some of the other programs as well.
Yeah, and I think it will also be very telling, Bill, what the administration is funding. You know,
Yeah.
are they big projects? I mean, there's caps. I think it's $25 million cap on RAISE, but it'll be very interesting to see the distribution and types of projects because it's a very broad program.
Yeah, and that's a good segue into this slide.
Yeah, so the next couple of slides are it's kind of the basics on competitive grants and what applicants you need to consider when you're looking at a notice of funding opportunity. This is kind of an aggregation. Not all grants are going to have all of these listed, but there are some common familiar criteria benefits that USDOT will use to evaluate applications. You know, as you can see, you've got climate, the environment, equity, union job, safety, resiliency. There's a laundry list of things. So it's very important for potential applicants to really pay attention to the things that USDOT is going to review in order for any application to get the highest rating it possibly can. So again, this is just some of the criteria and requirements that we've seen in NOFOs over the years. Next slide. What you need to know before applying. I don't think this comes as any surprise to folks. Like I said, not all grants will have the exact same evaluation of criteria. It's important to read the entire NOFO, but these are some of the things that we've seen in a lot of the NOFOs lately. These generally don't apply to planning grants. These are more on the construction side. NEPA, not a surprise. NEPA can be a very important part of an application. If you don't expect NEPA for 5 years, you may want to consider not applying for a particular program if that project is still in the early stages of its environmental. Financial completeness. Can you actually pay for this thing? Do you have the local match to move these projects forward? Do you have the technical capacity to successfully deliver the projects? Many programs require a score greater than 1 for a benefit cost analysis. If anyone's done them, I have not. I've looked at them. They're very they can be very complicated, but USDOT will look at these. They have a whole office set up to review the analysis that goes into these things. Again, on the planning grants, you're not going to probably need a BCA. Again, compliance with Buy America, that's not new. Compliance with Davis-Bacon, again, not new. Some of these new programs particularly require some sort of a preliminary engineering result in order to apply for it. So again, these are eligibility criteria, and these are going to be factors that are going to impact the likelihood of success on an application. Next slide.
And real quick on the non-federal match, Lev and I recently participated in a meeting with a number of MPOs that made us aware of sort of this false narrative that's out there on that percentage of match. So obviously for most programs, it's the 80-20 split. And we were hearing that a number of MPOs and applicants were bumping that percentage, the non-federal percentage up in hopes that it would give them a better shot at being awarded the funds. And so inadvertently, it was dissuading folks that couldn't go beyond the 20% from actually applying because they felt as though USDOT was going to look at something that had maybe a 70-30 split instead of an 80-20 and go with that one instead. And so We've confirmed that, that is certainly not the case as far as the review process goes. And we've been trying to kind of push back that, look, if you're only able to come up with the minimum requirement, you should still consider, putting in an application, but taking into account all of these other items that Lev's walking through as well. Obviously, there's a lot that goes into an application, but I just wanted to flag that, if you're not able to come up with more than the 20%, I wouldn't have that be the deciding factor as to whether you apply or not. Lev, did I capture that right? Anything else you want to add?
No, I mean, the statutes are the statutes. That one issue is also going to be different from administration to administration.
Right.
Let's put it that way. Next slide. Again, more of the, application process, what you need to consider, can you reasonably write a grant application that meets requirements? Do you have the personnel? Do you need to use consultants? Is it in your best interest to partner with the state? And then can you administer a grant? There are important questions that I think any MPO would need to think about before pursuing a grant. And this isn't meant to dissuade anybody. It's just, I think, just some of the reality that any applicant, whether it's an MPO, state, local government, or other, are going to have to consider when they go through the grant process, because it's not easy. But again, just things you need to consider. Next slide. So what's impacting implementation right now? The IIJA provided hundreds of billions of dollars in increased funding compared to the FAST Act. What's going to happen with that money? And what are the impacts outside the legislation that we're seeing right now? There's a lot of new programs, so the rollout has been slow. And it's not a knock on federal highways or FTA or the US DOT generally. It's a lot of work. Coming out of COVID, they lost a lot of staff. Or during COVID, I should say, they experienced a high amount of retirements. And their bandwidth right now is just lacking. Again, not a knock, it's just a reality. A lot of companies are experiencing this, but the rollout of some of the programs has been a bit slow. Inflation, it's had an impact on the IIJ funding increases. I mean, it's a factor that we're hearing from a variety of stakeholder groups. Construction costs are up. That's impacting some of these grant applications. You may apply, particularly for the earlier ones this year, where you do a cost estimation in an application, and during your 3 months of grant writing, the cost of labor and materials has gone up 25%. So these are things that are impacting that new money that was put out under the IIJA. Again, there's labor shortages, trucking shortages. Some states are implementing gas tax holidays, and that's going to affect states differently. Some states use it to fund their infrastructure, some don't. That issue has been talked about up here at Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C., but there's been pretty good bipartisan opposition to doing that, just because it's a tax holiday. It may provide a short-term, small, pocketbook win for the American public, but it's billions of dollars in infrastructure funding to the Highway Trust Fund. Additionally, you've got supply chain disruptions. They've been around for a few years now. Buy America, we've actually heard this from a lot of MPOs, that IIJA includes additional provisions under Buy America that many people feel are escalating costs on projects. Next slide.
And real quick, Lev, I just wanted to come back to the labor employment issue. This is something that we've been hearing throughout the MPO community, even from some significantly large, high capacity MPOs with hundreds of people on staff. The ability to, identify, hire, retain employees to really take on all of this additional work and implement these new programs. And There's always been an issue of, public sector versus private sector, but that's only being exacerbated, currently with the conditions. And so, MPOs are trying to come up with competitive packages to, again, identify, retain, and hire employees to help with a lot of this. So it's something that we as an organization are well aware of, and we'll be looking to having webinars and discussions with our members to just kind of share issues, share practices related to that. We'll actually have a couple of sessions at the annual conference in the fall in Minneapolis addressing some of those issues. So, would love to certainly hear from everyone here on that, but stay tuned for some more resources and opportunities to kind of talk through some of that in the coming months.
Now we're kind of getting to some current things that are going on in DC right now. Many of you may be aware that USDOT published last week a national performance management measure addressing greenhouse gas emissions from the transportation system. They have a new an NPRM that is out. It's requiring state DOTs and MPOs to establish declining declining CO2 targets and establish a method for measurement and reporting of the GHG emissions from transportation. The rule is not that long. It amends section of the regulations that deal with the broader transportation performance measurements that I know many of you on this call may have been involved in after MAP 21 back in 2012. It took USDOT several years to finalize the rules on many of the performance measures that were included in MAP 21. Under this new rule, there would not be a mandate on the level of targets, but again, you need to establish declining targets. There's flexibility built into it that would allow MPOs and states to develop these targets that are appropriate for the communities that they work in, and whatever their respective climate change goals may be, as long as the targets would reduce emissions over time. We have a summary that we will probably post and get out this afternoon. It's like I said, it's not terribly long. Do encourage you to read it. Comments are due October 13. AMPO as an organization will be submitting comments. We're organizing several members within AMPO to coordinate on a set of comments that we'll be submitting. But again, we encourage all members to send their own comments if they feel that this raises to that level, or they may just have their own unique set of circumstances when it comes to this particular proposed rule. Bill, I don't know if you want to.
No, I was just going to add, and as we do with all of our comment letters, we'll do our best to coordinate not only with members but also respective statewide associations. So we'll make sure to coordinate with VAMPO accordingly, and Ann and the executive team there. And if VAMPO decides that they'd like to put together a letter, we'll make sure to exchange information and be supportive wherever and how we can.
Excellent. As I mentioned earlier, there's a new program, Thriving Communities Initiative. This is really being driven out of USDOT. It's a new grant program. They were awarded $25 million last year in the appropriations bill. The basic premise is to provide technical assistance and capacity building to foster these thriving communities through transportation improvements. There's also a complementary program at Housing and Urban Development. So there will be coordination between USDOT and HUD on this program. In the House appropriations bill, the House included an additional $110 I'm sorry, an additional 100 million. The president had requested 110, but we're only halfway or partial way through the appropriations process. But again, more importantly, they're expecting to put a notice of funding opportunity out this fall. They being USDOT and HUD, may be hoping Congress passes appropriations so that they have more money to put in the notice of funding opportunity. But again, the basic premise of this program is to provide technical assistance, planning and capacity building to help build thriving communities in the eyes of what the administration is attempting to achieve under the policy priorities that it's aggressively pursuing. There's a website. Maybe we can provide a link to that at some point. I think we have a summary also on the MPO website. There's a lot of information out there on this. We do expect that MPOs would be a significant representation of the awards that are made under this.
Yeah, and I would just add, thanks, Lev. I had the opportunity to sit in on a call with the Office of the Secretary, where they walked through this program, along with the Reconnecting Communities program, and specific to thriving communities. They are really trying to think creatively and innovatively to identify partners and avenues to deliver assistance to small local governments. And so, AMPO's perspective on that is, well, you have a mechanism in place called the MPO that is able to do that. And, we're certainly going to push MPOs as a great partner to be able to work with USDOT to receive some funds and push capacity building and technical assistance and planning assistance. But certainly we'd appreciate any feedback from our members as well. And if there's any interest in learning a little bit more about that program, we have some time. They're planning on releasing a request for information, particularly on this program, in the next couple of weeks. AMPO will likely look to provide some comments, supportive of the MPOs being a good partner in this program. And as Lev said, we'll see a couple of NOFOs in the fall once they've received all the comments as a part of that RFI. So stay tuned, and we'll hopefully have some information in the next couple of months.
Appropriations for the upcoming fiscal year. The current fiscal year ends at the end of September. As you know, Congress has begun the process for appropriations for fiscal year 23. The House Appropriations Committee did approve all 12 of its FY23 bills. I need to update this slide because the House passed a mini bus that included the Transportation, Housing, and Urban Development appropriations bill. It's consistent with IIJA, so there's no cuts to the programs. Appropriations bill in the House does include earmarks for highways, transit, and aviation. I think we also have a link in a summary of the appropriations process where it stands. I think was in our newsletter last week, Bill, or the week before.
Yeah.
So if you want to find your earmarks, if you have any, they're listed in the committee report that accompanied the bill coming out of the House. Senate Appropriations has not acted officially on any bills yet, but they are potentially going to get something done before they leave in August. There's been some discussions. I don't really have any expectation that they'll pass anything before they leave. As you know, they go away for 6 weeks in August and early September for the summer break. As I mentioned, fiscal year expires September 30th. We do expect a continuing resolution. As you know, you've been through these before, or at least you should have a familiarity with them. It just extends federal funding at current funding levels, which would be 2022, for the duration of the CR. We don't know how long a continuing resolution is going to go. We'll learn more about that when Congress comes back after their summer recess. The CR will only affect the appropriations and any obligation limitations, such as the Highway Trust Fund. but they will not impact advanced appropriations. So the programs that are funded under the IIJA that have this advanced appropriation, they're good. They're not going to be impacted by the CR. The IIJA provisions basically acted like a 5-year appropriations bill for the programs that are funded in those categories. So any of the grant programs that are funded specifically and wholly through advanced appropriations, they should be able to stay on track regardless of what Congress does with the FY23 appropriations process.
And if for some reason you didn't receive our policy update on appropriations that went out last week, please contact me directly and I'll figure out what's going on. You should be receiving all of that information as a member of AMPO. So again, please let me know if for some reason you didn't receive it.
This is just a snapshot of what the House Appropriations Committee put out. As you can see, the green is the advanced appropriations in the IIJA. The blue is the Highway Trust Fund spending, and then the orange is just the regular appropriations that are included as part of the appropriations process. Not a huge jump from 22 to 23. We knew that coming, though. The IIJA, as you know, is a 5-year bill and lays it out for 5 years. The biggest jump in transportation, surface transportation funding was between 21 and 22, but it's just a graphic. We got midterm elections coming up. All of you know that. 100% of the House is up. 1/3 of the Senate is up. Depending on what you read, who you listen to, there could be a change in the majority in either chamber. That the Senate, it's on a 50-50 makeup, with the vice president giving the majority to the Democrats. Republicans have more seats up. I'm not going to make any prognostications right now on the outcome of the elections, but there will be impacts, potential impacts to surface transportation policy and spending if there are changes, which I think leads to the next slide. Maybe it doesn't, maybe it's the other slide after this one, but just remainder of 2022. Again, they're behind on appropriations. Typically, Congress will put together a unified budget resolution, but they haven't done that in a number of years. Again, expect a CR before September. We'll know more when they come back on how long that CR is going to last. This is an issue that has popped up ever since the American Rescue Plan had passed. There's a lot of information on this, but generally state and local governments that received ARPA funding under the COVID bill, under the COVID money, they wanted greater flexibility on how to use that money in terms of transportation. Senator Cornyn did introduce a bill that did pass the Senate, no action in the House, but it included this range of opportunity, if you will, to spend more flexibility on how to spend that COVID money. It was a greater of 10 million or 30% of the funds that recipients were awarded. And it was meant, again, to expand kind of the eligible uses. If you do recall, the only infrastructure that was made eligible was broadband and water and sewer. And that was, something that I think that many local jurisdictions as well as states thought was too limiting. In the final rule that Treasury did put out in January, they did maintain generally that roads and streets, surface transportation would not generally be eligible unless the project responded to a specific pandemic, public health need, or a specific negative economic impact. That's where this $10 million in lost revenue pops up. So if you can demonstrate this revenue loss, then it does provide some flexibility to spend funds, those funds, as long as it's a government service on infrastructure projects. Again, it's something that I think that the recipients of the awards need to probably explain to Treasury when they want to use funds for infrastructure projects outside the designated infrastructure that's in the bill. And then I did read that, recipients can use ARPA funds for road repairs and upgrades that interact directly with an eligible stormwater infrastructure project. So again, just some information on how eligibility has been expanded a bit, but there will be some justification required in order to use it for expanded eligibilities. Next slide. A couple of things we heard a lot about Build Back Better. Still stuck in negotiations. I personally don't have a lot of hope that anything's going to happen with Build Back Better. As you know, those were high-level negotiations between the president and Senator Manchin in particular. They needed his vote to get to 50 in order to put Build Back Better in the next bullet, which would be the reconciliation package, which only requires a simple majority in the Senate to pass. They're making an effort. Like I said, I'm not optimistic that they're going to get any of this done before the November elections, and then we'll have to see what happens after the elections in the next Congress. I think we have a slide that talks about what it may mean in the next Congress bill. Yeah, so just some scenarios. If the Republicans take over the House and Senate, expect a lot more oversight and scrutiny of IIJA. I would imagine, particularly in grant awards. I would also expect them to look at the review process of USDOT. Are they holding projects up because they don't meet administration policies? We did see, I suppose, a hint of this in a December 16th guidance memo that came out of Federal Highways last year that really leaned hard away from new capacity projects without saying that they would hold up new highway capacity projects. But there was a lot of, what's the right word, Bill? Grumbling on Capitol Hill in a bipartisan manner about how USDOT was going to be implementing the IIJA. So again, oversight and scrutiny. There's been speculation about these advanced appropriations and would a Republican Congress cut the spending that's been made available? Because as everybody knows, Congress can enact another law, president still has to sign it, but they can change the law if they have the votes to do it. President Biden, at least for the next 2 years, is probably going to reject any bill sent to him that would reduce spending in the IIJA. So I think for the next 2 years, funding should be maintained. I still think it's incumbent upon any recipient to make sure that they're spending and drawing down those funds as quickly as possible. Amtrak was a huge recipient of funds. They could be on the chopping block in a Republican Congress. When we get to 2025 and 2026, which is another election away, it's up in the air again because you could have a new Congress and you could have a new president. So again, the next couple of years, I think we're in good shape with the funding levels that were authorized in the IIJA. But I think what this administration is going to be looking, as any administration would, is efficient use of those federal dollars so that they can demonstrate that, projects are getting done, people are being hired, and it's helping the economy. Under a split Congress, again, more oversight. I don't expect any changes. And then if the Democrats do keep the majority in both chambers, they'll continue to pursue the greater agenda of the president. But again, the key thing in all of this, as we've seen over the last couple of years and in previous Congresses, is, the House simple majority wins the day. In the Senate, if you don't have 60 votes, you've got to try to come up with some sort of a bipartisan product, which is how we got the IIJA in the first place. So again, just some scenarios. There may be others out there, but I think the overall takeaway is that I don't expect a lot of changes in the IIJA implementation or spending levels over the next couple of years. And I think we're right on time.
Great. Yep.
All
So,
You guys got, is that it? Or you guys got
yeah,
more?
we're all set. I apologize, we came just a couple minutes late, but happy to answer any questions if there's time, or have some additional discussion. Just again, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here, and hopefully it was helpful information.
I think it was great. So thank you all for coming. Does anybody have any questions in the room, or can we see people online also? Questions in the room? No? Anybody online that has any questions for Levon or Bill? I'm looking forward to getting the PowerPoint, because that was a lot of information.
Yeah.
And I want to pick through a lot of it, because there was a lot of really interesting stuff that I saw in there.
Yeah.
I guess, oh, Alex, do you have something?
Yeah. I just I want to thank the presenters for the information. That's a lot of information. Can we get? Is there any way we will have access to the copy of that presentation?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I will send that around as soon as we jump off the phone here. I will send it to Ryan and the team.
Bill, let me just make a couple updates to it. Just
Yeah.
There's a couple of things I want to make sure you have the current information. That's all. It'll take 2 seconds.
All right.
Yep, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks,
like I
Kevin.
said, yeah, I look forward to getting that. And also, you all mentioned these summaries that you put out, like on the greenhouse gas emissions measure and the Thriving Communities Initiative. I'm sure they're on your website, but I'd love to get access to those when and if they're available, because I'd like to dig into those also a little bit. I don't know if I've really looked through all the resources that AMPO might have to offer. So it's just good to know that you guys are out there and providing this stuff. I'll probably have other follow-up questions after I see everything. So thanks once again. Anything else? All right, well, great. Thanks for being with us today.
Great, thank you. Appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of your day.
I do have one question. Levon, can you include in the stuff that you send us, information on the SDBG that you were referring to?
Yes, Lev jumped, but yeah, I'll make sure we'll pull the language from statute and we'll send that along with just a short narrative sort of explaining the intent of the provision.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that.
Sure. Yep. Great. Okay. Well, thanks again. I appreciate it. And we'll be in touch soon.
Thank you.
All right. Have a good rest of your day.
Yeah, that was a lot to take through. I'm sure we have a lot of questions about it. One thing that I noted for staff is that thing about the representation and equitable in the MPO. And you know, right now, I think the city and county are pretty close to like 50-50, but if we bring green in, is that something we want to consider, that like, should green have the same amount of voting representation as the existing folks? That's going to be in effect. A lot of other things in there that I'm sure we'll be talking about. Moving on to the next item, the RFP for the LRTP.
Sure, so included in your packet for this month was a draft RFP request for proposals from the planning director, Sandy Shackelford. We have included the updated language for Title 6. This will be presented to the policy board tomorrow. But the RFP is to obtain a consultant for the development of the LRTP You see the task and deliverables in the memorandum.
Yeah, let's see, I guess the memorandum is to appoint the working group, or do we need to do anything with that right now, or is that?
Sure. That's the other piece to this. So also from Michelle, there's a vision to establish a working group that will meet on the off months of the tech committee and policy board. This working group would be consist of much of the folks that are at the policy board or the tech committee, but some additional folks, Albemarle County Land Use Planning, Gabe Daly's, and Miss Susan Elliott's departments or offices with climate mitigation, housing, both in the city and the county. The CTAC did discuss or review the draft list of folks to be included, and they did come up with some recommendations for supplemental. So the supplemental group would not necessarily have to meet every single time with the core group. But the CTAC recommended that the Albemarle County Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion be added to this list. If the city had an equivalent department or office at them or at it, city and county school boards, city and county bicycle and pedestrian planners, the Regional Chamber of Commerce, and University Transit. And I don't know if Kevin or the tech committee, if you all have additional folks you'd like to add to the technical working group, but this will be sent to the policy board for approval.
Approval in two days or tomorrow? Okay.
To establish a technical working group, as well as to have the RFP released. So we can.
I didn't realize these were two separate items, so sorry if I combine those. Does anybody have any questions first about the RFP?
I'd just be curious, like, generally speaking, how do you all see this project being able to, you know, innovative from the last time we did one of these, how those RFPs were like pushed to, you know, or maybe it's similar to a great document we have currently, but it's just, but here it's just like high level, a little bit more about what you guys are, I mean, you can read something in the document, sometimes it's hard to get a true sense of what you want to try to accomplish here. So what big things you try to take.
Yeah, I think that one, to better prioritize projects, bicycle and pedestrian projects, to make a clear connection between how projects from the LRTP relates to the transportation improvement program, incorporating environmental or climate mitigation into the LRTP process and project selection process, and to better to better have or to have more competitive smart scale applications.
When you guys have ideas, how you get that accomplished, I mean, obviously you're looking for something, you're talking with folks who respond to the RFP, but how are you hoping to do that, the prioritization?
Well, project prioritization, we're hoping to get the support from the OIB grant, the Office of Intermodal Planning and Investment, and helping us determine what the metrics are going to be in order to score projects, in order to prioritize those projects. So that's the prioritization part. I think the consultant for this piece is primarily, frankly, because while the TJPDC has done long-range transportation plans for decades, this is the first time this staff has done one together. And so relying on the support of a consultant to help us through not only the project management, are we following all the federal requirements, but helping us create the fiscally constrained budget, knowing the available funding sources now versus 5 years ago when Smart Scale was just coming online, how we prioritize or grouped projects was very different than how they're being scored and selected. And so helping us through that process, helping us develop more robust public engagement plans in order to make sure we're getting out ahead of these projects and getting the engagement that we need before they come into the vote of the policy board. So really the RFP is, frankly, we've got a lot of one-time rollover money that wouldn't make sense to staff up for. And instead we're asking for consultant technical support to support us through the process. Obviously, along with our local team and our VDOT folks, but you know, this will give us additional support that I think this staff could use to go through this process for the first time together.
On that, the public engagement, say, it looks like the RFP has them serving in advisory capacity on the plan, providing feedback on the tools. So it's really, they're kind of in the background or like review suggestions. They're not taking the lead on this necessarily. That's going to be your staff.
Yeah, we want that to be
Your
locally driven.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the optional task 5, the communication strategies, you know, we've seen a lot of really creative ways to communicate an LRTP process to the public. And so we threw that in there, assuming the budget is enough to get a consultant to include that. You know, videos, interactive, you know, one-pagers with infographics, things that are much more digestible to understand where public input is most valuable and how the public can engage in the process where it's most appropriate. So that was included in there. I think it's also important, you know, to note, it's not coming before the policy board this month, but it will be, that we received an additional 47,000 in PL funds. So we're going to need to amend the UPWP. We're still waiting on some guidance from some of the things that Mr. K. was talking about. Are there going to be additional requirements on MPOs? If so, we will probably want to budget that funding towards those things. If not, then we're really waiting for Sandy to be able to have a little bit more ownership of this. But we're going to have to program in additional 47. It could be that we expand the scope for a consultant, or it could be that we use that funding to incorporate more staff time to do some of the work on the UPWP. But we'll be coming back to you all in your meeting in 2 months with that recommended amendment.
I don't know if this speaks to what Michael was getting at, but like, I wonder if there's ways that we can just check through the language on here to make sure that we're highlighting that we're looking through for like new approaches or creativity in the development of this. And that might be something that is considered in the scoring and in the review of the qualifications. So is that sort of what you were thinking?
Well, I was more asking just for the context, and I appreciate that. Great answer. You know, part of me is the current plan sort of lacks some maybe strategic goals, or it doesn't really think of like a bumper sticker. I was talking about thinking being a bumper sticker, easily to understand. These are the major things you're trying to accomplish. That's all we prioritize that. Tie that closely to, you know, how we're going to get that. The project should follow in that prioritization. I hear you all talk about prioritization. I think that's a good idea. I think it's something that we all recognize. It's sort of like, how does that prioritization work, and how does it sort of, with a series of projects, achieve a larger goal?
And a longer range goal, so
Yeah,
it's
whether
not
it's
every
climate
2
change
years.
stuff or multimodal, or transit, how are we tackling some of the things that we tackled in our community, and having those North Stars so we know where we're headed seems to be very important. Charles doesn't lack for ideas. It's just which ideas are the ones that are the most important for us to try and get done now, so we're focused on something. I think that's part of the prioritization process. But it sounds like you guys are trying to do that, so that's good.
Yeah, I noticed, I think later on in the agenda, we're gonna be getting an update on that OIB grant, so maybe, because I participated in some of those meetings, and I think that, I really like the discussion was going along with that. I don't know, I'm not entirely, maybe I'm not entirely engaged in it, so I'm looking forward to that update, but that, I think that's a big step forward as to how we're looking at these projects.
Any other feedback on the RFP itself that you all have? This will be bringing it to the policy board for their approval. So
Yeah.
your comment was include some language on, we're looking for like creative and innovative ways.
Yes.
Is that what you said?
I think so. I think that would be nice to see if people show new ideas here. So see if there's a consultant out there that can demonstrate that they've come up with something that they think worked well. That's a new idea. But anyone online have any comments on the RFP?
I guess one other question, the performance period is 20 months, again, I haven't gone through this process before, but it's almost 2 years to get through to get the adoption plan.
Yeah, I think it's having them on with us along through the whole process.
But when would we hope that, so their process is after our LRP is adopted, or we would expect the LRP to be done in about 20 months? From the time they sign off, it's about 2 years from now.
Is that including the time for the modeling? As I recall, that modeling period takes a full 2 years, I think, to go through, as I remember. It's really long.
I believe so. We've already kind of, yes. Yeah, I can follow up on that if I hear otherwise. I feel fairly confident saying yes, but
And VDOT is doing the modeling?
There's a section down that says long.
Yeah.
Yours truly will not be doing the long. As much as I'd like to learn a little more about it.
Okay.
Question I have was the vision plan in November, is the 6 month enough time for them to integrate? Or reference it?
the vision plan will be completed in November of this year.
Oh, 23 was the. This year or 23?
The governance study, you mean the governance?
Oh, you mean governance, transit governance?
Vision plan.
Yeah.
Transit plan.
Yeah,
The regional transit vision plan to be completed no later than November 2023.
And it's 2022 with the governance study being completed, 2023.
Is that on the website?
That's on the draft.
That's on the
This is
RFP.
on your
That's a
RFP.
good catch.
Yeah.
So it's supposed to be 22?
The transit vision plan will be completed November of 2022.
Okay. That makes sense.
You know what, we'll include, now that you bring it up, we'll include an additional bullet on the governance study since we were awarded that since this was drafted. So we'll have that bullet and amend that date.
Hopefully your consultant is smart enough to figure all this stuff out and track it down. Maybe you want to add links in the RFP to some of the work you already have. That way they make sure that the pool is good where you're at and stuff.
We can put a study date on it.
Yeah.
Thank you, those are all good feedback, appreciate it.
As far as the lot of the stuff that came out of the CTAC meeting, are you guys gonna add that to the bottom of this memo, or are you just gonna bring it up generally to the MPO board?
Yeah. Are you talking, you're talking about the meeting next?
Okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
I'm following your lead, Chair.
Yeah, sure, blend that.
Totally anything more involved.
Yeah. No, that's fine. I just wanted to clarify because I had some questions about
Okay,
that.
I'll hold on.
No, I think we're done with the RFP and we're good on that. Shouldn't somebody else have any other comments? So, yeah, no, I have the same question, Michael, on the.
I thought they were really good suggestions coming out from the citizens who were on that board, like at the school board, this whole major issue we have right now, with school buses and walking to school, and there was a couple other ones that I made notes of. But
Yeah, Brian, do you mind repeating what the recommendations are? I'm not sure I caught all of them. I was not at CTAC.
Sure, it's the Albemarle County Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. I'm not sure if the city has an equivalent. City, county, school boards, city, county, bike and pedestrian planners, the Regional Chamber of Commerce, and University of Trenton.
And I think you also mentioned Alex's Office of Community Solutions. I mean, I don't know, Alex is still, Alex is still here, but, especially if there's sort of tie in town.
So I think what we would do is, and we can put it up on screen and have it available for everybody to look at so that it's not just auditory. But I think we'll put the list, because they've already been sent the packet, so we can't revise what they've already been sent. And then say, here are additional recommendations by CTAC, and then any additional recommendations that you had, or if you wanted to support CTAC's recommendations, we would also bring that to the policy board.
I mean, I think this is a supplementary group, so they be copied on the information, so they don't cover these kind of issues we discussed, they would show it every once in a while. To me, I think maybe casting a water net might be a good idea in that regard, you know, that was the time. My understanding, it didn't use.
And then can I clarify, were all of them recommended to be added to the supplemental? Thank you.
I mean, I thought a lot of it was talking about folks who would be good inputs from the outside and would consider the presentation. I thought there was good list of stuff that the citizens and all that.
With the focus on the linkage between housing and transportation, should there be a consideration for housing on that supplemental group as well?
We've got Albemarle County Housing. and
That's on the
Solutions
original
Housing.
list. I keep opening and closing pages. Thank you, got it. Brilliant. Oh, yeah, I remember this conversation. So, believe it or not, Sandy drafted this before she left to make sure that we had everybody that we had talked about. So good on her.
Out of the list of additional recommendations from CPAC, I know we just talked about having them all as supplemental, but I think that university transit might be a better fit in the corridors. I know their funding structure is different, but I think it fits better with the corridors.
That's a good point. There was some discussion about that.
That needed to, thank you.
And so you want to form this technical committee, like, what's the timeline for technical committee? And I guess the LRTP as well.
The development of the LRTP, so it would be the 20 to 24 months, seeing it through to its completion.
Starting when?
ASAP. After we can get it approved, we will start.
Right. So we're 2 years out right now from when we think, or when the LRTP needs to be completed.
Yes.
I guess my only comment on this is, should we have a little bit more on what our engagement strategy is before we develop this committee? And I just say that because I wonder, like, how this technical committee relates to this committee, the TAC. Where are we on here? Is this a second committee that we're going to be on? And how are those committee meetings going to happen? And then the other thing, like, RTP isn't on here, but all the representatives from the RTP are on here. So I'm just confused as to how the process is going to work. And when we start appointing this, I don't know, I guess I'm a little afraid that we're going to, like, end up with all these, like, committees and we don't know how they're supposed to be interacting and actually, like, completing the plan.
Yeah, and I think that the intent behind this is to not use all of the MPO tech committees to dig into the weeds of the LRTP, but rather give updates in this meeting and bring in more voices into the technical meeting. And I don't know how often they plan to meet. I didn't see it in here. Do you know, Ryan? Did you
Yes,
talk to Sandy?
Yeah, I think they're scheduled to meet every other month, so I will meeting here in July. they would be reminded. You alternate months.
We alternate months. Yeah, because I mean, like, Albemarle County Transportation Planning is the same people that are here.
So it's,
Go ahead, Alex, sorry.
yeah, this staff technical committee, is it gonna be temporary or standing? What are some of the topics they will be considering? Is it gonna be like transportation planning or the RFP? After the RFP is done, their job is done, or what?
It will be a temporary committee just through the completion of the LRTP. And its intent was to make sure that we are expanding the focus beyond just transportation and transit-related staff and representatives. Make sure we're incorporating the other things on here. UVA Office of the Architect, Public Works, land use, climate action, that we're thinking about the long-range transportation plan comprehensively across all of these other departments.
So is it gonna be like advisory group, advisory planning group?
Yeah, it's gonna be a technical group more so than an advisory group, but yes. I hear what you're saying about it is another committee. I think what we wanted to do is not change the MPO tech meetings to include all of these other people, but have a meeting focused on the LRTP.
I mean, that's fair. I think that can work. I just want to make sure that we're
Not
considering
several.
it all as we're putting this together. That this committee that's meeting here today is not necessarily going to be diving into the details of the LRTP. That's going to be the work of the technical committee,
Correct.
the LRTP technical committee that may have the same people, many of the same people on it, but it's slightly different. Okay.
Sir, so the core, can we look at the core as being the voting members and supplemental is just going to be advisory to the decision making, or it's an informed core group, so they don't. They're just here to advise us. Is that how?
Yes, I think that's a fair way to represent that.
Okay. I also don't want this to bloom to have hundreds of numbers and we all.
And that is something we are always sensitive to, because too big of a working group is unwieldy.
I mean, if you have one from each of these representatives, I don't think that's
Gonna be,
going to be too much. I mean, if you add like the school board and UTS, the bike ped planning, I think right now I know the city doesn't have a bike ped planner. We don't have a bike ped planner. So the transportation planning really is that. I don't think the city is going to have one probably for most of the period of this. I don't know if they're thinking about getting somebody back and they're working on getting their transportation.
Yeah,
planning
they're
manager.
putting priority on that right now.
Yeah. So I don't think that's I mean, it's a good suggestion and we want to make sure that's incorporated in the plan, but I don't think it's necessarily somebody that's going to be able to sit on that committee separately from our transportation plan.
and then following that, do you recommend that it's not an additional person?
I mean,
Or
I
do you
just
want us to
don't-
leave it on there, and if those positions get filled, they can be brought into the process?
Well, going back, I'm sorry, go back to the question. Not that you, maybe you thought you hit the weeds. So we were talking about voting members. Are we taking votes on this technical committee? No. The vote would be really this committee. So they're serving an advisory role. And, again, that's why the supplemental part works well. You're making sure these other people may not be coming on these meetings, please get the copy on it. So they sort of understand what's going on.
And can provide input as
Yeah,
appropriate and as they're
yeah.
willing, yeah.
So,
Is this this technical committee? It might be a good idea for those folks that are not present at this meeting, to probably provide some kind of a written overview, of the committee, what they are going to be doing, or the group rather, how the membership is going to be constituted, and whether it's going to be temporary or at some point temporary or standing, and then how the group or the engagement process is going to occur. Then send it to everybody so that the folks who are not here may review that draft or content, and then maybe if they have any questions, they can provide a feedback or ask questions or whatever.
One more big picture question for the core group listed for the technical working group. Other than the VDOT residency, is there anyone on that list that is not already attending this meeting? Because I'm just wondering if maybe it makes sense for the core group to continue to be the technical committee and just have those discussions during our regular technical committee meetings, and then have those off-month meetings be of just the supplemental group, and then your supplemental group can be bigger to meet all those additional recommendations.
So using the MPO Tech meeting to go into the details of the LRTP rather than all, any other updates from the MPO, all that kind of stuff.
Perhaps, I mean, if the core group really represents the same people, do we need to get updates from the offering of meetings?
Yeah, that makes, I can see the sense in that, as having the core group is the technical committee. And honestly, I mean, Carrie or whoever would attend from the residency, I don't know if they necessarily need to be core group on this. I think they could probably.
We coordinate with them.
Yeah, and the other one is public works, or city of
Yeah.
Charlottesville Public
Yeah.
Works, but once again, I don't know if they necessarily need to be part of the core group.
Do we know who or what division of public works we're looking for?
Yeah, I think that the goal was to keep it not specific to the point. Keep it with some flexibility, so that the policy could make those decisions without having to specific.
Your Gabe's are client from the climate action one. Yeah, I don't know how public works is set up in the city. We also have we have a public works division too that's starting to take on a lot of maintenance of roadways, so.
Great, I have on here, MPO Tech recommends that the technical committee be the standing MPO Tech group, and that supplemental people can be brought in either on off months or as needed in the MPO Tech meetings as an invitation. Does that work for you all? That that's the recommendation of this committee?
I like that because it also brings consistency to the group. So the technical committee doesn't have to relearn the things that happen in the off months to be able to make the decisions that we're making. The technical committee is the core group, and we can just start. I mean, since we're all the same people anyway, we might as well just start meeting every month. And then, like you said, on the off months, supplemental groups also attend.
Did you say the MPO Tech meeting every month?
Well, I think that's needed for sure. I mean,
The
I'm
standing
getting ready to
event.
say the same thing.
Yeah, that's exactly.
If I hate for you to be like, well, no, we don't meet for a whole,
2
2
months.
months from
Right.
now. I think,
Right.
if you need us to meet more frequently. I mean, personally, it'd be great if we get done in less than 2 years, but I understand how things, work. So let us not be the holdup for moving quickly. That's my opinion.
The only other consideration would be any time crunch we have for standing meetings, if there are other things on the agenda, we don't have time for the LRTP, depending on what issues are, I guess, so then we might have.
Going off month.
If is that frequently something would happen, you think?
Is other items coming to the MPO Tech, it would be the normal things that you all have on your agendas when an LRTP is not going on.
Right, so that public business, public, I'm taking a long time to talk about this, but you know, maybe we tackle it a little efficiently.
Excellent, thank you for your feedback.
Oh, can I make one other nitpicky comment about additional folks for the supplemental group? It was mentioned the school board. I wasn't sure if the school board was the right group, but maybe like more school planning staff, especially for the city. I'm thinking they have a safe routes to school coordinator, right?
They do. And there's also somebody, I think it's in the county, right, that you guys have, like, at least school bus.
So have the school district appoint somebody, and it may not necessarily be a member of the school board on that supplemental committee. So
Yeah, I'm just not sure, I'm not exactly sure the role the school board plays versus the people we work with when we're talking about like safe routes and school projects or something like that.
Right,
I've never talked to the school board, so I'm not sure what their role is with transportation.
our school board doesn't get heavily into it. But we have a director of transportation for schools that I think would be really interested in what's going on here. So that might be the person more appropriate.
and I believe the city has something analogous, and then they also have somebody who's, say, across the school coordinator.
Yeah, and so maybe you just say Albemarle County Schools, City of Charlottesville Schools.
Representative.
Yeah,
Doesn't have to
and
be on board member.
let the, whoever they want to appoint, let them make that decision who they think is going to be most effective.
So you want it to be a decision made by the school board?
No, made by the school.
School administrators.
Whoever,
Schools
yeah,
administration.
perfect. That's
You really opened us up on this one, man. We really get down to the weeds along that.
I feel like a lot of times we make committees without really thinking through how that committee is gonna function.
Yeah.
And you end up having to like recreate it then midway through, or it doesn't seem to be working. So it's a good, I think it's a great conversation for us to be having.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
right, I've got that.
So what's our, what's the conclusion, the bottom line of the discussion?
I'll attempt to summarize, since I'll probably be communicating it to the policy board. MPO Tech recommends that the technical committee for the long-range transportation plan be the MPO Tech existing standing committee with supplemental, the supplemental group either meeting in off months or invited to the MPO Tech meetings when their expertise is requested. And then MPO Tech meeting at least every other month as regularly scheduled or as needed if additional meetings are needed in the off months. And then MPO Tech agrees with the recommendation of CTAC to include diversity, equity, inclusion in the city and county. A city and county school member, can be staff or otherwise, regional chamber to be included, and UTS to be included. Also bike ped to be left on there pending filling it with staff. Am I leaving that one on?
That's, I mean, it's fine if we want on. Alex, do you know, or is this in the next
6
20
months, 12 months?
Yeah, I guess it would make sense to appoint somebody 12 months into it, but is the city looking to hire a new bike ped coordinator in the next 6 months?
I think that position is being consolidated with the transportation planner, I think. So there is an effort right now to hire a transportation planner. I think it has been advertised, I'm not sure. But I know there is a serious movement in that direction to hire a transportation planner. That person will be in the NDS office.
So I say then let's remove bike ped, because the county's not going to hire a separate bike ped planner. We do that in transportation planning. It sounds like that's the way the city's moving now too.
Yeah, I heard they're going to hire a transportation planner. We're going to hire a transportation planner on the network. the higher light pit. That's what I read someplace, like.
I don't think that's what Alex was saying.
Yeah, if you are going to need somebody right away, you can get the transportation, the traffic engineer, to serve on the committee. If the committee will start working right away until the transportation planner is hired.
But either way, we think that the transportation planner could cover that for the city or the county, that it doesn't need to be a separate person.
I think so.
They can liaise
That's
back
right,
to
yes.
their.
Yes.
planner. Got it. All right, I have all of those to bring to the policy board. And thank you for helping us. I know sometimes getting in the meetings takes a long time, but like you said, we do want it to be valuable. Creating committees just to create them doesn't help anybody's work be more efficient. So, thank you.
Thank you. I guess we are a bit behind schedule now, so you want to jump into the staff updates?
Pick up some
Yeah,
more
sure,
stuff.
so I know that the SIP amendment and adjustments should be pretty quick. So the MPO Policy Board will be approving one TIP amendment. That would be the bridge replacement, Route 20. The other three are adjustments. I believe that there's nothing in our public participation policy that requires a formal public hearing and so forth. So the policy board should be approving the TIP amendment, and of course, there are the three adjustments, and Chuck will, Michael, certainly left, but I think Chuck said he will be available tomorrow in case there are questions about the amendment.
Is there anything we need to know about the amendment?
They're just adding money, most of the Belmont Bridge, they went from 25 to 31 million back, before it went advertised, after it was advertised, they had that 4.2 to meet the bid. And then there's another 2.7 put on it subsequently. So that's why we're at 38. We get the details of that.
Fine with it. All city, so Alex. I'll let you, okay, got anything to add to the TIP amendment there on Belmont Bridge?
Say that again. It's hard hearing you guys from that meeting room.
I think we were just talking about the various increases in dollar figures on that project, Alex. I think it's pretty straightforward.
Which project?
Belmont Bridge.
Oh, Belmont Bridge. Well, whatever it is, we're gonna, JJ is not here, Janet, but it's gonna be taken care of one way or the other, because we gotta get that bridge done.
All right, I think we're good on TIP amendments, adjustments.
All right. You ready for the next one?
Yep.
The TJPC ride share, Sarah?
I will be pretty brief at the moment. Obviously, we are working on closing out FY22 with DRPT, and then also starting all the FY23 plans. So far, we have been told that there will be some promotions for Discover Transit or Tri Transit in September, and then a rideshare week or month in October. So we're waiting for more information about that and how we will be promoting those particular initiatives locally, as well as with the state and the information and materials that they provide. In addition to that, I will say just a couple quick things about Afton Express. Amazingly, and to much of our delight and surprise, ridership has remained very steady through the summer, which is very encouraging, and we're super excited about that. In addition, the CTB did approve for additional funds this fiscal year for a 4th bus that is mostly looking at running routes that would accommodate the health service workers at UVA on those 12-hour shifts. Since that grant is through the Central Shenandoah PDC, they are in the process of procuring a new bus for that, and then additionally drivers for that before that schedule change and everything gets rolled out. They will be celebrating their 1st anniversary on September 1. So we're looking to do some really fun promotions with that during the state's transit programming as well. And yeah, I kind of think that's it for now. So happy to take any questions.
Anybody have questions on our chair?
Smart scale round 5. Thank you, city and county staff, for submitting your economic development sites. There are 2 that I cannot read. I think one's in the county, one's in the city. I'm not sure if Mr. Alex, you're the person, or know who I can talk to specifically at the city. There's only one site plan that can be from each jurisdiction. Not sure how important that is for me that I voted, but I can confirm the numbers for the square footages of those 2 projects. But the applications are due August 1. I should have, if the city's resolution is coming after August 1, I understand that can be uploaded to the VDOT portal. Yeah.
As long as the MPO,
When is the application due again? August 1?
Yes, sir.
Just let us know which project you had trouble with.
Yeah,
Did you say?
look more that's copy, but yeah, I can go back and.
Might not be able to help. That might be all we have, but we can't.
I was just curious, it may have been an accident, but I noticed that there was a wayfinding application or development project. Is that just a mistake, or not? There's something in smart skill that I'm missing signage. Doesn't seem to be. That's all I have for smart skill.
I will say that you gave this map in our packet of the projects, but it looks like it's missing some of the Albemarle County projects.
Right, now they don't include the Preparatory Lane, the Mill Creeks, the Avon Street projects. These are just the 4 MPO projects and then the pipeline projects. So Peter Jefferson Parkway, Walton Road, Route 22, Moose Road, and then hydraulic Avon, Van.
For the bubbles.
Right.
But yeah, I was looking at that first map on there. It looks like it's trying to show all, because it does include the county's Fifth Street project and the county's Avon project.
Oh, yeah, I see what you're saying. So basically, yeah, Belvedere should be on the, yeah, I can just remove that.
Yeah, the Belvedere, I know, with the city has at least one that they're spinning on their own, right?
Now, they scrapped that project.
They scrapped the project, okay. Yeah, so Belvedere and Old Trail are not shown on here. Yes, I just don't want, if the board sees it, then Albemarle County board members will be like, wait, why don't you have these projects? And you might want to either not show any projects that the county is submitting or show all projects.
Right. Oh, yeah.
yeah, you may want to take off project B as well. That's not.
Yeah,
Oh, B is the one that was scratched, right?
It's, I'm sorry, you're talking about B on the first page.
Yeah.
Yeah,
yeah,
on this,
okay.
like, so
Making
for
sure I'm
that,
doing the same thing.
either take off, definitely take off B, because that's, they're not applying. But then for the county projects, you could either remove D and E and say, we're only showing the TJPDC MPO projects, or add the other two. County projects. Yeah, the old trail. All right, we can keep moving. We're hitting our end time here. What do we got next?
yeah, the last bullet, yeah. Just do it.
Or-
No, you were in the last two meetings, you should give that update.
Yeah, so basically,
I was not, I was out of town.
the consultant team, and, staff continue to meet the same shop for, sit in on those, they have, my paper, they have come up with, some metrics for prioritizing IT investment projects. I think at some point, we're going to
I think I missed the past two meetings as well.
I was out of town. Sandy was in both, so there will be
Oh,
consistency when she gets back, but I was also out of those two.
But yeah, they have developed some metrics. There's to what the and provide us with information on that organization process.
Some more to come.
Yes.
is there, at some point that maybe we could have a presentation on, like, overall presentation on that? Because I know I have been in a bunch of meetings that I've seen bits and pieces, but I haven't been able to follow like the whole, like, where we are, what the next steps are, and what the ultimate outcome is.
Yep, I'll follow up on that.
Maybe at our next MPO Tech Committee meeting, like the actual specific presentation.
Mhm.
More detail.
Is there a project website or something like that, where we can get information on all of this, or where is, how do we learn more about you?
I don't think there's a website for this one. For wait,
Just like it says, product materials that are.
I'll follow up with you, because I talked to Sandy about our conversation that we previously had. I'll follow up on getting more formal presentation on what's going on there.
I think we're at our time, so moving on, we don't need to do the round table if that's okay with everyone, unless somebody has something burning they want to mention. Okay. And I don't think, Sean, or you're the only member of the public, if you would want to raise your hand if you have a comment or anything. He's just recording it. Okay, well, with that, I think we're done. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Guess we need to vote on those minutes at the next meeting. Yeah.
Same with the chair.
Quick summary, summary meeting.